everyone. So I want to take a little bit of time here to go over the PowerPoint, the first lesson here in week 5 on rhetorical patterns. All right, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it is a nice introduction to the different styles of writing that you are likely to be asked to do in an academic setting. And we will be writing in a couple of these styles in this class specifically. All right, so basic rhetorical patterns, and the subtitle of this lesson is genres, because if you don't know what rhetorical patterns means, genre is an easy way to sort of bridge that gap. All right, so we have here 2 discussion questions. The first is, what do we mean by rhetorical patterns? And I just gave you a hint, but that still might not really clarify for you. Okay, so rhetorical patterns are kind of like genres. Okay, I know what genres are. You know, there's genres of movies and genres of books and different things like that. So, all right, but still, why is it called rhetorical patterns here in this lesson? Why not genres? All right, well, how about this? We're going to think here real quick. This second question: what do you look for in a good horror movie? Right? Horror films, the genre of movies, right? And when we decide to watch a horror movie, we go into it with certain expectations. Now, even within the genre of horror films, there are actually subgenres. You know, there's like horror films that deal with like paranormal activity. There are horror films that are more like your classic slasher films, you know, like Halloween and Friday the 13th and things like that. There's also, you know, like a psychological thriller type of horror movie. All right, so even within that one main genre, there are different subgenres. So like if I'm going to watch a slasher film, I probably have certain expectations. If I'm watching something that's more along the lines of like paranormal activity, you know, then I probably have a different set of expectations, maybe some similar crossovers, but still they're going to be slightly different. You know, if I'm going in to watch a movie that is a horror film, but it's really more about like alien life forms invading, then I'm going to have certain expectations for that as well. The idea, though, is that let's just say we're going to watch like a classic slasher movie. You know, we're going to have certain expectations. We're going to expect that it likely involves younger people. We're going to expect that there will be some sort of goofing off, or, you know, like they're going to be having fun. There might be sex involved. There might be drugs and alcohol involved, because that always seems to be what happens before the killer strikes. We know that that we can expect that there will be numerous jump scares. We might even expect that there's going to be a fair amount of gore, you know, blood. We would go into it with certain expectations, right? If we were going in to watch a horror movie, if someone said this is one of the best horror movies I've ever seen, you know, it ranks right up there with classic slasher films. It's going to be one for the ages. And we watch this movie and it doesn't have a lot of those things that I just mentioned. We might be a little confused. Like, how is this in the same vein as classic slasher films when it doesn't contain these elements? You know, if we were told that a movie we're going to see is a horror film, but it plays more like a romantic comedy, that's, and maybe we like romantic comedies. There's nothing wrong with romantic comedies, but we were expecting a scary movie. So when we talk about genres, each of them has certain characteristics that define them and that we expect them to have. And if they fail to include enough of those characteristics, then we have a problem, right? So rhetorical patterns are ways of organizing information so that it is easier to digest and comprehend. They're a lot like genres of movies, genres of books, genres of music. Each genre has its own defining characteristics that allow the author to write within that chosen genre, right? So if someone is interested in writing science fiction books, they know what is required, what is expected in that of that genre, and then they can sort of keep themselves contained within that larger framework. Those defining characteristics also allow us, as a reader or a viewer or a listener, to know what to expect. We have certain expectations when we go in to watch a certain type of movie. And if that movie fails to meet our expectations, if it has gone outside of the genre too much, then we're probably disappointed, possibly confused, maybe even angry that the movie didn't deliver like it should have. And the same is true with writing, right? Same thing with, all the different genres of books out there. But in an academic setting, in school, we refer to those genres as rhetorical patterns. And in the world of academia, you are often asked to write in many different styles using different rhetorical patterns. And so if a genre of books, a certain genre has certain expectations, and if those expectations aren't met well enough, then it fails, then we know that a rhetorical pattern in an academic setting has certain expectations, and if we don't meet those expectations, we have failed. So it's important to know what some of the more common rhetorical patterns are. I'm going to introduce you to the most common ones here in the following slides. We will not be using every one of these rhetorical patterns in this course, but we will be using some of them. But even still, even the ones that we're not using, it's good to at least have heard of them and kind of understand, like, oh yeah, okay, I have written in this style before. And yeah, there are certain things you have to do if you're writing this type of paper, right? Okay, so we're gonna skip that slide actually. First, description, right? This is typically done mostly in basic comp courses, but there actually could be times where you're given a small assignment, even in one of your core classes, where you are asked to describe something. And description is all about the 5 senses: what you can see, what you can hear, what you can touch, what you can smell, what you can taste. Description often uses things like similes and metaphors. So it's academic, but it's not necessarily, facts and statistics and research. It's what you can observe, right? And the more detail you can provide, the better the description is. Okay. Oftentimes, and I actually used to do this for my composition classes, but I don't anymore. One of the most popular rhetorical patterns in a composition course is narratives, which often includes description, because a good story includes good description. But that's what a narrative is. It's a story. It describes a sequence of events. It tells a story. It's using sensory details, personal reflection. Oftentimes it'll use dialogue. You know, but it's a personal narrative typically. So it's something that you have actually experienced. You're telling your story. You know, and there are certain expectations for a narrative. You're going to set the scene. You're going to introduce the complication and evaluate it. There's going to be a climax. You're going to resolve it. I mean, even if it doesn't have to be like a major life-changing event, but even still, if you're choosing to tell a story about this moment, then there is some significance to it. And we will expect that it reads like a story, right? There's also definition, and it's really exactly what it sounds like. It is a piece of writing devoted to defining something. It could be defining the exact meaning of a word or phrase. It could be explaining how or why a particular term is being used, why it's used in a particular way. It could even be defining like a concept or a feeling. You know, if we were to say something like, okay, well, before we can make policies regarding family values, we have to first figure out what we mean by family values. That would be, the rest of that paper would then be defining or seeking to define what family values means, right? And believe it or not, you can get a whole paper out of just a definition. We have cause and effect. This is a very popular one. Obviously, you're going to be writing about the causes and or effects of something. It does not have to be cause and effect, even though that's what it's titled. Sometimes you might just be focused on the causes. Other times you might be focused on just the effects. Other times it might be a little combination. You might be talking about some causes and some of the effects. But it's explaining how and why. It's typically arguable, but not always. You could be explaining something that is already sort of accepted as fact, as a cause-effect relationship, but it is a very commonly used pattern for argumentative papers, right? So if you're told you're going to write an argumentative essay, you might choose a topic that lends itself to the cause and effect pattern. Okay. We have process analysis. It explains a process. It could be a how-to analysis, like how to change a tire, or how to tie a tie, or how to make a specific recipe. But it could also be a how it works analysis, like how a bill becomes a law, right? So a how-to analysis is you're explaining the steps in a way that the reader can repeat those steps and get the same outcome. A how it works analysis is just providing information that explains a series of events from start to finish. But as you could probably guess, if it's a process analysis, organization and thorough explanations are crucial. You have to get the steps right, and you have to explain each step fully. You will be using this rhetorical pattern informally in some of the journals and discussions that you'll do in the second half of the term. You'll do, I think, let's see. Oh yeah, how to prepare for an exam, how to procrastinate. I think those are the two big ones that we do. But you won't be writing like a big graded item with process analysis. It'll just be in a low risk informal setting. Our next pattern is classification. This is where you are listing everything that fits into a whole class, like a whole group. And you have to decide on the principles of classification. And then you're going to sort them into groups, and you're going to explain the defining characteristics of each group. So you're going to be doing this in an informal way too. Let's see, one of the, I think it's a journal prompt that you'll do is types of first dates. You will be asked to classify types of first dates. So you have to think to yourself, okay, how can I classify these? How can I arrange them into different groups that fall under that main category? You know, there's you know, your awkward first dates, your aggressive first dates, your rude first dates, your you know, better off as friends first date. So it's not bad, but better off as friends. There's the love at first sight date. So you have to, you know, classification is thinking about, here's the bigger group that I'm talking about, but how do I break that down into smaller groups that are all a little different in some way? And another good way to think of it is genres. You know, we're talking about, you know, you have, you know, movies as the big category. Well, there's all different kinds of movies. So how can we categorize different types of movies? And how are we choosing those categories, right? If we're gonna make a category of movies that are romantic comedies, what do we mean by that? What characteristics do romantic comedies have that make them romantic comedies, right? So same thing with what you'll be doing. You'll do, like I said, types of first dates. You'll do types of bosses, which that prompt you'll actually be given options. You can do types of bosses, types of coworkers, or types of classmates. Oh, and then you're going to be doing types of roles that you play every day, right? Every day we take on different roles. Like me, I am a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a teacher, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, you know, so what defines each of those roles that I play? What are the defining characteristics of each one? So that's classification. Again, you'll be doing it informally, low risk assignments, nothing big, worth tons of points, but you will be using this pattern later in the term. Our next one is evaluation. Evaluation is what it sounds like. When you evaluate something, you are looking at different parts of it to make a judgment, right? And you make that judgment based on specific criteria, right? You're going to use your expert knowledge, examples, personal experience to help support that judgment. So it's making a recommendation for or against the topic, like a review does, right? So, you know, like a restaurant review, it's evaluating a specific restaurant based on specific criteria. Like, what do you look for when you go out to eat somewhere? What do you expect a place to offer, right? Is it nice atmosphere, cleanliness, friendly service, lots of menu options, good food, low prices? What is it? What are, you know, the main things that you look for when you go out to eat that a restaurant has, what the boxes that restaurant has to check off in order for you to want to go back and to recommend it to your friends? That's evaluation. You will be writing in this pattern formally for this course. In fact, the lesson right after this one is all about exemplification and evaluation. It tells you much more than this slide does in terms of what is expected when you are writing to evaluate. And then you will be writing an evaluation paragraph this week for homework. And it's one of the big writing assignments for this course. Remember this one, and then the one you'll do next week in week 6, writing assignment 1 and writing assignment 2, they are worth 40% of your overall grade. All right, now they're only one paragraph each. So on the one hand, it's somewhat easy. On the other hand, you've only got one paragraph to make sure you get it totally right. And they're, again, worth 40% of your grade. So you're definitely going to want to go through that next lesson this week, the one that's right after this one, to make sure you fully understand what the expectations are for this rhetorical pattern so that then you can make sure you do that when you write your paragraph. And then, of course, our last rhetorical pattern here in this lesson is compare contrast, which is what you will be doing next week. Right? So week 6, you do writing assignment 2, compare contrast paragraph. Compare contrast, you're looking at similarities or differences. It could be similarities between 2 or more people, differences between 2 or more places, similarities between 2 or more objects, 2 or more ideas. You can compare and contrast many different things. All right. A comparison focuses on the similarities. Contrast focuses on the differences. You will want to choose 2 topics for next week, and you're gonna, decide, do I want to focus on how these 2 things are similar, or do I want to focus on how these 2 things are different? And the answer to that question will then determine what types of main ideas and examples you use in your paragraph. There will be a lesson next week on compare contrast, again, where you learn much more about this rhetorical pattern and the expectations that come with it, so that then you can make sure you include those elements in your paragraph. All right. So, you want to make sure that you go through the lessons, the remaining lesson here in week 5 and the lesson in week 6, to make sure that you are fully understanding these 2 formally written rhetorical patterns you'll be doing. We are not going to have separate lessons on process analysis and classification. There's just not enough time, and I don't want it to get confusing. Yeah, you're going to be using those patterns in some journals and discussions later in the term, but I want our focus to just be on the 2 rhetorical patterns I've chosen to have you write formally in, which is evaluation and compare contrast. Okay, so that's it on rhetorical patterns. It's really nothing groundbreaking if you can think of it like a genre, and just know that in an academic setting, we call them rhetorical patterns, and each one comes with certain characteristics and expectations, just like genres of movies have expectations and characteristics, genres of books, genres of music, what you write in school, each type of writing comes with expectations as well. You're going to learn more about 2 of those patterns, and then try your hand at writing in both of them. Okay. All right. So that's it for this lesson. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you're free to go ahead and move on.